Hi, everyone. Welcome to this channel. I am William. Thank you for joining me here. Today, we are going to explore a topic that sits at the heart of how modern organizations protect and create value: the role of internal audit in enterprise risk management. Before I begin, please feel free to subscribe and hit the notification button so that you will receive our latest podcast video seamlessly. Let me ask you a question. If you think of your organization as a large ship sailing across the ocean, who is responsible for spotting the icebergs ahead, monitoring the changing weather, and checking the structural integrity of the hull? The answer is multi-layered. The business units are the lookouts on the deck. They keep their eyes open every day. The risk management function is the onboard meteorologist. They provide specialized analysis. An internal audit? Internal audit is the independent surveyor who periodically inspects the entire vessel and reports directly to the captain, not only on what might go wrong, but also on whether the navigation systems are working as they should. Over the next couple of minutes, I will walk you through 4 key parts. First, we will clarify what Enterprise Risk Management, or ERM, actually means. Second, we will define the core roles that internal audit plays within ERM. Third, we will look at the practical 3 lines of defense model and see how internal audit fits in. And finally, I will share some common challenges we face in practice and how we can address them. Let's begin with the foundation. What is enterprise risk management? Enterprise risk management is not just a compliance exercise, it is a strategic discipline. According to the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations of the Treadway Commission, better known as COSO, ERM is defined as the culture, capabilities, and practices integrated with strategy and performance that organizations rely on to manage risk in creating, preserving, and realizing value. In simpler language, ERM is a structured, consistent, and continuous process that runs right through the entire organization. It is used to identify, assess, and respond to all the uncertainties that could affect the achievement of your objectives. Think of it this way: ERM does not just look at one wave in front of you. It looks at the weather forecast for the whole voyage, the depth of the water beneath you, the remaining fuel, and the morale of the crew. It brings every major source of uncertainty into a single, coherent picture. The most widely adopted framework worldwide is the COSO Enterprise Risk Management, integrating with strategy and performance. This framework explicitly links risk management to strategy setting and performance management. One of its most important messages is this: internal control is a part of risk management, but risk management is broader than internal control. That means internal auditors cannot limit themselves to checking whether controls exist and operate. We must also evaluate whether risks are being properly identified, understood, and managed, even when formal controls are not yet in place. You might ask, why should internal audit care about ERM? First, because our stakeholders expect it. The Institute of Internal Auditors, the IIA, has conducted global surveys showing that around 57% of chief audit executives already participate actively in enterprise risk management processes. Even more telling, 60% of those surveyed expect that integration between internal audit and risk management will deepen further over the next 5 years. Second, because if we do not understand the risks that matter most to our organization, we cannot plan our audits effectively. We will spend time on low-risk areas while the big threats grow unnoticed. That is not value-adding, it is value-destroying. So ERM is not a trend, it is a reality, and internal audit must be fluent in its language. Now we come to the heart of our presentation. What exactly does internal audit do in relation to enterprise risk management? Before listing specific activities, we need to state a non-negotiable principle. The IIA's International Professional Practices Framework clearly states that internal audit provides independent assurance and, where appropriate, consulting services designed to add value and improve an organization's operations. However, internal audit does not own risk management, and it must never manage risks on behalf of management. In other words, we can evaluate risk processes. We can recommend improvements. We can advise on better risk responses. But we cannot make risk decisions, accept risks, or implement risk treatments. That would compromise our objectivity and independence. This is the red line we never cross. According to the IIA's position paper on internal audit and ERM, we can identify 3 distinct roles that internal audit can legitimately play. Let me go through each one. Role 1. Using ERM information to inform audit planning. This is the most fundamental role, and every internal audit function should be doing it. We use the organization's own risk registers, risk appetite statements, and risk assessment outputs to build our annual audit plan. Instead of guessing where the biggest exposures are, we rely on the risk intelligence already gathered by management and the risk function. For example, if the ERM process highlights cybersecurity as a top-tier risk, our audit plan should include a review of IT controls, incident response, and third-party vendor management. We are effectively aligning our audit coverage with the organization's risk priorities. This role is purely about information consumption. We take what exists and use it for better scoping. Role 2. Providing assurance on the effectiveness of risk management. This is the classic assurance role, and it is where internal audit adds unique value. We conduct independent evaluations of the entire ERM framework. We ask questions like, has the organization established a clear risk governance structure? Are risk identification methods robust and comprehensive? Are risk assessments performed at the right frequency and with the right level of detail? Are risk responses, whether accept, avoid, reduce, or share, aligned with the risk appetite? Is there adequate communication and reporting on risks to the board and senior management? Our assurance work provides confidence to stakeholders that the ERM process is working as intended, or it highlights gaps that need fixing. This is not a one-off project. It should be a recurring element of our audit cycle because risk environments change constantly. Role 3. Providing consulting and advisory support. Here we move beyond assurance into a more collaborative space. Management may ask us for advice on improving their risk assessment techniques, designing better risk dashboards, or embedding risk considerations into strategic decisions. We can give recommendations based on our observations from other audits, our knowledge of best practices, and our understanding of the business. This consulting role is very valuable, but it must be performed with caution. We must ensure that our advisory activities do not cross into management responsibility. For instance, we can suggest how to set risk criteria, but we should not choose the criteria ourselves. We can recommend a risk response strategy, but we should not execute it. And we must always document our advisory engagements clearly so that everyone knows where our advice ends and management's decision begins. To visualize these roles, let us use the well-known 3 lines of defense model, which has recently been updated by the IIA as the 3 lines model. First line, operational management. They own the risks and implement controls on a day-to-day basis. Second line, risk management and compliance functions. They oversee and monitor the first line, providing frameworks, policies, and guidance. Third line, internal audit. We provide independent, objective assurance on the effectiveness of both the first and second lines. Notice that internal audit is separate from both lines. We do not manage risks. We do not oversee risk management. We evaluate both. That independence is exactly what gives our opinions their weight. In practice, we might audit the risk function itself. For example, we check whether their risk assessment methodology is sound and whether they have adequately challenged the business units. We might also audit specific high-risk areas jointly, but always with the clear understanding that we are examining, not operating. It is equally important to spell out what internal audit should never do in ERM. We do not set the risk appetite. We do not impose risk limits. We do not approve risk responses. We do not perform risk assessments on behalf of management. We do not manage any risk-related projects or systems. If we ever engage in these activities, we lose our ability to provide objective assurance, and we create a conflict of interest. The IIA is very clear on this. If the internal audit function performs these roles, it must have safeguards in place, and in many cases, it should not perform those roles at all. So, our motto is simple. We evaluate, we advise, but we never decide. Now let's get practical. What does internal audit actually do day to day to fulfill these roles? 4.1. Integrating risk into the annual audit plan. Every year, we conduct a risk-based audit planning exercise. We gather input from the ERM function, from executive interviews, from board discussions, and from our own continuous monitoring. We then rank potential audit subjects by their residual risk, that is, the inherent risk after considering controls. The highest residual risks become our priority audits. This process ensures that our limited resources are deployed where they matter most. It also demonstrates to the audit committee that we are fully aligned with the organization's strategic risk profile. At least once every few years, we should conduct a dedicated audit of the ERM framework. This is not about auditing individual risks. It is about auditing the process that manages all risks. We test whether the risk governance structure is effective. We review whether risk identification workshops are properly facilitated and documented. We examine whether risk aggregation is done correctly and whether the board receives meaningful, actionable risk reports. We also benchmark the ERM maturity against recognized models, for example, the ISO 31000 standard or the COSO maturity levels. This gives management a clear roadmap for improvement. Increasingly, we combine risk and control testing in integrated audits. For a major business process, say supply chain management, we first understand the key risks, supplier failure, logistics disruption, price volatility, and then we test the controls that are supposed to mitigate those risks. We also assess whether the risk response strategy is appropriate and whether residual risk is within appetite. This approach moves us from a pure control testing mindset to a risk and control mindset, which is far more valuable to the business. Our audit reports should always link findings back to risk impact. Instead of saying Control X is missing, we say the absence of Control X exposes the organization to a high likelihood of Y, which could affect our strategic objective Z. This language resonates with senior management and the board because it speaks in terms they already use, risk language. We also regularly provide the audit committee with an overall opinion on the state of risk management and internal control across the organization. This opinion is built on all our individual audit engagements, plus any other relevant information. It is one of the most powerful outputs we produce. In some organizations, internal audit is invited to sit on risk committees as an observer or advisor. This can be beneficial. We gain deeper insight into risk discussions, and we can offer our perspective on process improvements. However, we must be careful not to become a voting member or a decision maker. Our seat at the table is to listen and to learn, not to steer the risk agenda. No discussion is complete without addressing the real-world challenges. Let me highlight 4 common challenges and suggest practical ways to handle them. Challenge 1. Lack of mature ERM processes. Many organizations are still at an early stage of ERM maturity. Risk registers may be incomplete, risk assessments may be subjective, and risk reporting may be inconsistent. Our approach. When we audit an immature ERM process, we do not simply criticize. We provide constructive recommendations, and we may propose a phased improvement plan. We also adjust our own audit planning. If the ERM information is unreliable, We supplement it with our own risk analysis and discussions with management. Challenge 2. Unclear boundaries between internal audit and the risk function. Sometimes the risk function expects internal audit to take over some of their monitoring duties, or management assumes we are the chief risk officers. This creates confusion and potential independence threats. Our approach, we proactively clarify roles. We can co-develop a charter or a protocol that explicitly states what internal audit does and does not do regarding ERM. We also ensure our audit committee understands and supports our defined scope. Challenge 3. Pressure to provide real-time risk assurance. With the speed of business, management often asks for continuous or near real-time assurance on risks. This is difficult for a traditional audit function that works on quarterly or annual cycles. Our approach, we can use continuous monitoring techniques, data analytics, automated alerts, and key risk indicators to provide more frequent updates without compromising the depth of our periodic assurance engagements. We also manage expectations by distinguishing between monitoring, which is management's job, and assurance, which is ours. Challenge 4. Balancing assurance and advisory roles. When we advise management on risk improvements, it can be difficult to later audit those same areas without bias. Our approach, we apply strict safeguards. For example, we assign different teams to advisory and assurance work. We also ensure that any advisory engagement is fully documented and that management clearly accepts ownership of the resulting actions. If the advisory work is significant, we may refrain from providing assurance on that area for a period of time. Let me wrap up by summarizing the essence of everything we have covered. First, enterprise risk management is a strategic integrated process that goes far beyond internal controls. Second, internal audit plays 3 key roles: using ERM information for planning, providing independent assurance on the effectiveness of risk management, and offering advisory support, all while strictly respecting the boundaries of independence. Third, we operate as the third line of defense, separate from both operational management and the risk oversight functions. Fourth, we face challenges: immature processes, role confusion, real-time demands, and balancing our dual roles. But with clear charters, open communication, and professional judgment, we can overcome them. Ultimately, our goal as internal auditors is not to be the police of risk. It is to be the trusted advisor who helps the organization navigate uncertainty with confidence. We shine a light on the blind spots, we ask the tough questions, and we provide the assurance that enables leaders to make better decisions. Together, we can make risk management a true competitive advantage. That's to the end of my sharing today. If you found this podcast is useful, please feel free to share it out with your friends and colleagues. Thank you, and have a great day ahead. Hi, everyone.